Module 4, Components and Versions. This is another concept that originally came from the core Jira software tool developed many years back. And it has its roots in software projects, but don't be too quick to dismiss these because they can be useful to help you group, organize and manage these issue records that you create within Jira. So a couple of points to bear in mind when it comes to versions and components. First, the components functionality, which you may or may not see in this left-hand menu, is only available in the company managed project type in Jira. As yet, it hasn't been made available in team managed projects. The second point to bear in mind is that for the versions functionality, you may find you have to go into the project settings and you'll see a features option in there, and to switch on the versions option and feature, you'll need to scroll down past the components bit, which is already on by default, to the releases section and switch that on. And at this point, in a company managed project with the feature switched on for releases, what we should see is both the components option in the left-hand menu and the releases option in the left-hand menu. So first thing, components. This is just a way to group issues in your project. Now this concept may have originally been around a software project, but don't be too quick to dismiss this. It can be a useful way to group and organize the issues and units of work that you're recording in Jira. So from a components perspective, you can come in and you can define different components which are like subcontainers within your project, if you like. And a typical way to build this out as you create components with a software project might be to name things as, break your project down by the UI, the database, and maybe an API, etc. But if you want to think more in terms of traditional projects, I mean, maybe as a high-level example, we think about a rail project. Maybe you've got a project for a new rail line, so you might create components like the trains and the carriages you need to work on. You might have the track, you might have the signalling, and so you can see that this is just a way to break down your project into smaller components that are easier to manage and track in their own rights. And in creating these components, you can then assign issues and link them to the components, and every time you create an issue for this trains component, for example, you can say to assign these issues automatically to a particular person that's responsible for this component in your project. So now you'll see when we create issues within this project, and I might create a task which is to build the track, I can then allocate this and link it to a particular component. So for this example, where I'm building the track, I might link this to the track component, and this will then automatically be assigned to the person that's responsible for that component within. So when I view this issue to build the track, you'll see that the assignee has been set to me, and that's because I've been linked as the owner for the component track. And this functionality really comes into its own when you start to want visibility just for a component within your particular project, because when you go to search for issues, for example, you can then filter by component. So if I click on the More button down here, search for component, select components, I could then search just for components that are for the track component within the project. And not only does this lend itself well to searching for the issues, but for dashboards, reporting, for roadmaps, for timelines, you can filter just on a single component within your project when you need to. So that's components. The other aspect here we wanted to look at was releases and versions. So again, this has its origins in software development, and the idea that we have different releases, and those releases are labeled with a version number. But again, this is a useful concept for more than just software projects, because you can think of this as milestones as well. So I could, if I'm on a project that is not a software project, for example, I could create a milestone. I might call it milestone A, for example, start date and the release date that I set. I can then start to allocate issue records in Jira to this particular milestone or release or version or whatever you want to call it. So when I create an issue in here, so I might have another task, so create a train, for example, and when I scroll down here, not only am I linking it to a component, which is train, but I'm also linking it to a milestone or a release that I want to deliver this piece of work within. So I select milestone A here and create that. And let's just quickly create one more. Let's create engine, and we'll create one more issue type linked to the component train, and that's going to be in milestone A as well. And now when we come in to view our milestone A, we should be able to see all of the issues that are allocated to this particular release or milestone. And we can get a feel for the status of all of the issues or elements of work that we want to complete in this particular release or milestone by looking at the progress of work in the left-hand panel as well. The other concept within this releases functionality within Jira is that every release has a particular category, and that can be, it's either been released, it's been released and we've archived it because we're no longer interested in it, or it's in an unreleased state. So I can view all of my released and unreleased versions, milestones here, and you can see here version 1's already been released, and all of the issues, all of the units of work in that have been completed. This particular release, version 2, we didn't complete some of the work, and version 3, version 4, and the milestone A, we've still got a degree of work to complete before we're ready for that release. But where you may find this really useful is when it then comes to tracking this on the timeline or in roadmaps, because you can see these milestones marked on the timeline, and you can then visualize that milestone along with the work that you're looking to complete in that milestone before that milestone on the timeline within Jira. And finally, just like we had with components, when you come to search for issues either on your backlog boards, your list view, or your issues view, you have the ability to add filter criteria on here, and one of those might be the fixed or the release version, and then we can search based on a milestone, all of the issues in a milestone, and all of those issues for a particular component or assignee or a status. So maybe we're interested in only the issues in our milestone A that are in an in progress or to do state. And that's it in terms of Jira fundamentals. These are really the core building blocks within Jira. Everything else that comes after this, whether that's roadmaps, boards, reporting, dashboards, etc., everything else is built on top of these 4 core components. If you get to grips with these, it stands you in good stead for really mastering Jira and building upon that knowledge as you get used to using Jira to manage your projects.